Good morning and warm welcome to this webinar. My name is Anna Vainikainen and I work at the Outokumpu Group Sustainability team. I joined Outokumpu in May this year and my main task is to implement the ResponsibleSteel standard. Besides me, I have here my colleagues representing the group and German communications, Anna Niemi and Claudia Fischer, to look after you and your questions. The purpose of this webinar is to give an overview on Outokumpu's ResponsibleSteel certification and the related stakeholder activities, which include asking for your feedback and interviewing chosen stakeholders. And for the sake of impartiality, this process will be done by our external auditor, DNV. Just on the housekeeping rules of this webinar, as this is a live event, you are automatically muted, but questions can be posed in written format in the Q&A box. Both English and German are perfectly fine. And this session will also be recorded and the materials will be shared with you afterwards. And in case of interest, we are of course very interested in having separate discussions with you on this topic. Now, looking at our agenda, I will first give you a short introduction to Outokumpu and our operations, especially at Business Area Europe, which is the scope of the certification. After that, I will present briefly ResponsibleSteel as a concept and the standard and our certification process. Then we will discuss more about the stakeholder outreach and engagement process and the next steps. And there's also room for questions and comments at the end of the webinar. Once more, you are very warmly welcome. So, Outokumpu, who are we and what do we do? We are the global leader in stainless steel. We have net sales a little over 7.5 billion euros and we employ about 1,000 persons. And we have operations globally in over 30 countries and production sites in Finland, Sweden, Germany, UK, US and Mexico. And as said, the main focus of this webinar and our certification is at European sites. Our main raw material is recycled steel, which links us very strongly to climate and circular economy topics, which are also covered by ResponsibleSteel standard. And as a bit of a speciality, we have our own chrome mine here in Finland, in Kemi. As I already mentioned, we have solid presence in key regions globally. And on this slide, you can see which kind of operations we have and where. So once more, the focus of this session will be on the European manufacturing sites. But as said, we have also operations elsewhere and we are headquartered here in Helsinki. Business Area Europe, that's our largest business area, having a wide range of various stainless steel products. And Business Area Europe is differentiated within two strategies. The other one focusing on high volume stainless steel products and the other one on advanced materials. And we have been present in the societies in which we operate for a very long time, and we have over 100 years of technical expertise within this field. And a little bit more about our operations in Sweden, Germany and Finland. In Sweden, we have 3 manufacturing sites, coil production and integrated production site in Avesta, a cold rolling mill in Nyby and quarter plate production in Degerfors. These are all included in the scope of this certification. In Finland, we have integrated production site in Tornio. And for Germany, which is of course the main interest of this webinar, We have cold rolling mills in Dillenburg and Krefeld, and precision slip production in Dahlerbrück. What is not included in the Responsible Steel certification scope is our sales network and service centers. We also have one finishing unit in the Netherlands, but that is also for the time being excluded from the certification scope. So next, a little bit more about Responsible Steel, both as a concept and then on the standard and its requirements. Responsible Steel is at the moment the world's first global independent scheme for responsibly sourced and produced steel, and as far as I'm concerned, it's also the only one at the moment. And what is important with this Responsible Steel concept is that it follows certain guidelines which guarantee a credible and transparent approach. And it is a voluntary initiative, but it is based on multi-stakeholder approach and external auditing. So it's not just the industry declaring itself sustainable, but various stakeholders are included in the process of drafting the standard and making changes to it, and planning also other activities related to developing and creating sustainability of stainless and other steel types. And Responsible Steel supports the whole sector in making necessary changes for securing also our success in the future. And as can be seen from the Responsible Steel mission, this approach covers the whole value chain, starting with responsible sourcing and ending with recycling of steel. So it is a very good platform to discuss various aspects of sustainability. And the key outcomes and the concrete tools that Responsible Steel has developed are of course linked to standardization and the certification, but it is also a wider concept engaging various stakeholders to work on this topic together, and we find that very valuable. And we also appreciate the approach that Responsible Steel has taken to include various stakeholders in this process. And we believe that this gives us a very good platform to drive positive change through the recognition and use of Responsible Steel, so that we all internally and our external stakeholders become more and more aware of the topics linked to sustainable steel. So why do we see Responsible Steel important, and why do we want to be part of this initiative? We think that Responsible Steel supports our sustainability work in multiple ways. It helps us to promote internal engagement to sustainability. It makes these efforts more visible and more concrete. It also helps us to respond to customer needs related to sustainability requirements, and it enables us to create and develop our responsible sourcing practices, and it supports our marketing and communication when we talk about sustainability and stainless steel. And more and more focus has been steered on sustainable finance, so the work we do linked with Responsible Steel ensures also access to capital. And knowing the multiple legislative developments, especially here in the European Union on sustainability, this approach and the standards requirements help us also to anticipate these changes and ensure that we are ready for the future legislation. So many things go hand in hand in implementing this standard. Who are Responsible Steel then? As I already mentioned, it is a non-profit organization with a multi-stakeholder approach, and it has various types of members on board. Business members there are over 50 of them, and besides business members, also civil society members, and that enables us to have very good discussions and benchmarking on various sustainability themes, on what is considered important and how we are able to develop these things further together. And in addition to business and civil society members, there are also associate members, with the difference that they are not able to vote. And on the members, current members, the ones rounded with red are the ones having already ResponsibleSteel certified sites. So there are 7 companies altogether at the moment. And our aim, of course, is then to be the next one and the first one in the Nordics. And this is taken from ResponsibleSteel's own material, current status. So ResponsibleSteel covers already around 13% of global steel industry in its membership. There are over 40 certified sites on 5 different continents, most of them located here in Europe. And the certified sites and their production cover over 100 million tons of steel already now. So a lot of things have been made in just 3 years' time since the launch of the standard, and many more certifications are in the pipeline right now, and ours being one of them. How does this standard work then? What does it consist of? A couple of words about that. This is a very busy slide, but the main thing here is that there are 3 levels of responsible steel in the scheme. So the first one is the membership level, and as said, Outokumpu joined ResponsibleSteel in 2019. And the second level is then the certified site level, and that is what we are aiming at right now. So going through that standard and the requirements and getting the certificates then allows us to use the certified site status. And the third and the latest level is then related to product certification. The standard was updated now in September with additional requirements on responsible sourcing and greenhouse gas emissions, with specific requirements on product and not site level. And this is then the third level, which is still, there's a test phase going on, and there's also, we're looking for some further guidance on what kind of claims can be made on products. But as said, this will be done in the future, and now Outokumpu is focusing on the site level certification. Just a little bit of a history and background. As said, the scope has been at the site level when the first version of the standard was launched in November 3 years ago, and updated version was published a year and a half ago with no major changes in the contents. And now ResponsibleSteel is then steering the focus from the site level towards product level certification, and the latest version of the standard is then has these new features and requirements focusing on the product level. There were also some other changes related to the standard. The number of the principles changed, for example, but it is still fairly easy to keep separate the site and product level requirements. And in case you're interested in reading about a case study on certification, ArcelorMittal has published a short story on their experiences when they were the first ones to get the certificates in July 2021. Looking at the standard for a certified site, there are 13 principles which then embrace all the important sustainability themes. And they are further divided into a little over 60 criteria. And this 60 criteria is then further divided into externally auditable requirements, which are now mounting over 500 in the latest version of the standard. Of those, about 150 are related to the product level, but still at the site level, there's still plenty to do and tackle. And as said, these requirements are externally auditable, which then improves the credibility and transparency of this whole certification. The 13 principles that I mentioned, they form the foundation for the standard, and that they are divided into 3 different groups, being the ES and G, environment, social, and governance, but the opposite order. So starting with the governance principles, there are requirements related to corporate leadership, commitments, values, policies, how these are lived up to both at the group and the site level, and how competencies and awareness are being increased and ensured, linking back to the standards requirements. And then the second principle is about management systems, risk management, risk identification, target setting, anti-corruption, legal and beyond legal compliance, and so on. The new principle is on responsible sourcing, focusing on the product level topics, but there are also still requirements linked to the site level responsible steel sourcing requirements as well. And fourth principle is about decommissioning and closure. So what kind of plans there are in place in case sites are or part of the site is being closed, what kind of impacts it has on the surrounding society, and how these impacts will be taken care of. Then moving forward to the social principles, there we have many familiar themes. Occupational health and safety being the first of them, which is have to keep in mind at all times. Then there's one principle on labor rights, and here the labor rights is a very wide concept. It includes the topics linked to collective bargaining, for example. So has requirements on worker well-being and other topics linked to labor rights, also in more developed societies. So it is not just the basics of this topic. The same applies to human rights. It covers topics such as child labor, forced and compulsory labor, mechanism to raise concerns, and to make sure that these concerns are also then discussed and managed. And here also the focus is on both on our own workers, our own personnel, but also contract workers and other ones that we have an indirect impact on. So a very wide approach linking to human rights due diligence and human rights risk assessments. ResponsibleSteel has a very strong focus on has their own principle and requirements in the standard, and it's also very closely linked to local communities. And this is probably one of the main topics that differs ResponsibleSteel from many other standards and approaches. And we will get back to this topic in more detail little after a while. On the environmental front, there are principles covering main themes such as climate, of course, and noise, emissions, effluents, and waste. Various kinds of environmental impacts related to our manufacturing operations. On water, the approach is wider than the normal water intake and discharge balance. in terms of quality and quantity. ResponsibleSteel takes a wider view on water stewardship, which is then very well anticipating also water scarcity or extreme weather events linked to climate change, for example. So how do the water bodies that we affect by our water intake and discharges and other stakeholders are using as well, how will they be impacted by us and others? And how do we make sure that there will be plenty of water and water of the quality that we and others need also in the future? Very interesting approach. And the last principle covers biodiversity topics, also raising and theme still not that much tackled in terms of management systems, or there are say concrete tools lacking, but ResponsibleSteel has already a good approach inbuilt to this for mapping biodiversity risks and impacts and creating an action plan and on that with surveillance. And one of the things, interesting things with ResponsibleSteel is that the certification process will, of course, result in the audit report, but also there will be a public version of the summary of the audit report published at the ResponsibleSteel website. And the public summary will contain general information about us and our certified sites, but also a description and results of the stakeholder engagement process, how that has been done and what kind of feedback has been gathered from the stakeholders and what kind of improvement suggestions are given by the auditor. And then there will be a general summary on the audit findings, mirroring our current status to the standards requirements. And the similar summary has been drafted published on all the certified sites so far. So if you are interested in having a look at them, especially from the stakeholder perspective, then there's a link through which you can go and download these reports. Now we have learned new things about ResponsibleSteel, the concept and the standard and its requirements. And next I will share information on how we as Outokumpu have started our journey towards the certification. The certification has various phases and steps, and here I have divided them into 4 stages. The first one is about conducting self-assessments on the ResponsibleSteel requirements. It is basically conducting a gap analysis on the standards requirements, and this is to see where we are based on our current situation, and also gathering our knowledge and information on various sustainability topics into this one template. In the next step, in the stage 1 audit, the self-assessment is then checked together with our external auditor, and we have chosen DNV as our partner to this process. And based on these findings, either there's more homework to be done, or then we are ready to submit the self-assessments to DNV, who will then conduct a thorough self-readiness check on them to make sure that we are capable and ready to move on with the process to stage 2 audits. And this stage 2 audits is then more of the traditional version of audits. So it includes documentation review, it includes personnel interviews, and a thorough site visit to see how things actually work in practice. And the third element is then the stakeholder identification, outreach, and engagement. And this webinar is part of that project stage or step. And our role as Outokumpu is to identify our key stakeholders related to each site that is being certified, and to share information about this certification process. And this webinar and the next webinars to be taken place in January are part of this effort. And also other forms of external communications will be used for this purpose. After that, we will exclude ourselves from the process, and then we will take over to organize feedback and interviews. I will explain a little bit more about them later. Then the final or the fourth step of the process includes then more of a bureaucratic steps linked to ResponsibleSteel and our auditors to draft the audit report, and then check the final report and to make the certification decision based on that. And if everything goes as planned, we are expecting the certification decisions by the summer of next year. And then there will be a surveillance audit to be conducted within 18 months, and then the certificate is valid for 3 years, if everything is as it should be. And here is the same thing that I just explained, but put in a timeline. So looking at the months, we are now in December, almost in January, and we have so far during this autumn worked on the self-assessments and the stage 1 audits. And we have also identified our key stakeholders, you among others, and started informing you about this process. And then beginning of next year, we will continue the stage 1 audits, and then hopefully move smoothly into the stage 2, get site visits and interviews conducted. And at the same time, DNV will then take care of the stakeholder engagement and communications project or process. And as said, that is something that they will then inform you more about. So, coming to our last main topic in this webinar is how this stakeholder outreach and engagement works. I have already covered this topic a couple of times, but just to explain it once more and wrap things up. So stakeholder engagement is really an integral part of ResponsibleSteel certification. One of the reasons might be that as it is a global standard, and there are different societies with different legislation in which companies operate, and sometimes it might be more up to the company to decide how much of the local communities and stakeholders are taken into account and their needs if there isn't that much basic legislation in place. But still, even in the Nordics and in Germany, where we have a solid legislation base, there is always room for interaction and other forms of engagement with you and other stakeholders to also hear your thoughts, concerns, ideas on where we are and how we are doing and how we could do better. So ResponsibleSteel as a standard and approach also supports us in developing these activities. And here we lean on to the ResponsibleSteel requirements in Principle 6 and 7, and also to this process through which we really hope that we get good feedback on how we are doing and what could be done better in the future. So to keep the process as confidential and transparent as possible, the roles are pretty clear here for us and for our auditor, as I already explained. We are the ones who launch this process with these information webinars, and other forms of external communication linked to discussion with local media. And also it's worthwhile to check our website from time to time on this topic, social media as well. And we have also gathered a list of identified stakeholders, and we have also forwarded or sent this invitation to this webinar for you and the other ones. And as said, we will then share this information on our identified key stakeholders with DNV, and they will then take the lead on the next steps. So they will organize the possibility to provide feedback on us. That'll happen early next year. The feedback channel is electronic. There will be at least one possibility to do this through the ResponsibleSteel website, but as we think that not all might find their way there, we will also encourage other ways of informing about this. But we as a company will keep our stand or step out of this process to keep it confidential and independent of us. And after the first round of feedback, DNV will look at that and then decide on which of you stakeholders they would like to interview more. And they will be then in contact with that to request the possibility to conduct the interviews. And that'll then happen towards spring, most likely around March, April next year. And to ensure that this whole process is as fluent as possible, the DNV team will have German, Finnish and Swedish speaking persons, so that you all in Germany are then you have the possibility to have the discussions and interviews and provide the feedback in German, so that the language won't be a barrier to this process. And as said, this is something that happens between you and DNV, so we don't know what kind of discussions are held and between who. And we will only get an overall description of the results and the feedback from DNV at the end of the process. And we hope that as many as possible get interested in this and use the possibility to provide the feedback. And for our part, we will definitely use the learnings of this process to develop our approach on stakeholders even further and make the best out of this, because we think that part of our sustainability, the interactive and proactive engagement with you all is one of the key things. And looking at the time, we are well ahead of the schedule, but when we were planning this webinar, we thought that since it's mostly a monologue than an interactive discussion, then it might be that we don't have to use all the time that is reserved for it. And as said, now it's good time to pose questions or other comments through the Q&A box in case you have some, and if not, you are of course very welcome to contact me or my colleagues later on this topic. So far, I don't think we have any questions. But in all, I hope that you have all now learned a little bit more about ResponsibleSteel, what kind of work it does in the form of the standard and other ways to improve and promote sustainability in the steel sector, and for us stainless steel especially, and how we are embracing this standard and what kind of a certification project we have now in place and what kind of stakeholder engagement and communications is linked to this process. Thank you all for your attention, and as said, feel free to contact me in case you have any questions or comments, and this recording and the presentation will be shared with you afterwards. Thank you very much.